I'm sure my kids would not believe that that's what I walked up to, but they'll never know, right, Guy? All right. Well, just building on what was said there, one of the chords that struck me in the morning sessions was this whole issue of, again, the size of the opportunity that we have, and then the challenges that we face in actually implementing it. Just going back, up to like 20 years in some of our histories, thinking back to some of the themes that are still constant and present for us. Even, way back then it was how do we apply RFM into our overall tracking and segmentation and targeting. Those things are still relevant for some companies today where those are actual challenges in getting those things in market. So the explosion with all the data that we have really only makes this more challenging, more difficult. And as was noted, prioritization really becomes key. One of the things we're going to talk about today then is really how do we use our customer information, our overall information infrastructure to drive relevance, which obviously is one of the key tenets of what we're all about. And just a note on that, the discussion again this morning about how often we should be contacting our customers and worrying about frequency of contact measurements or thresholds. One of the measures that we typically stand very true to is that if we have high relevance with our communications and we have a belief that it's going to be driving incremental behavior, the actual count of messages or count of touches is much less important than the quality or the relevance of the messages themselves. So as we go through this prioritization exercise, that's one of the themes that will come out, is that if we can truly get relevant with our customer communication, we don't have some of the other worries that say the spammers or some of the other creepy kind of context companies are having to worry about. The other piece that comes into play here is really what we should be doing, and that is centered around really how do we prove out what it is that we're planning on doing. And one of the challenges that so many of our clients have is getting internal alignment on what it is that should be happening. And what we're trying to evolve away from is from subjective measures or subjective strategies or subjective opinions and get more into an objective frame of mind where we can prove out and get the organization aligned and excited about what these different strategies and market can actually do. So this whole issue of alignment is really one of the secondary benefits that can come from this type of work, and it's really, I think, one of the burdens that we face as a database-driven marketer is to be able to prove out and to show and to kind of give the dream or the vision of this is really what is likely to happen, and give the organization a chance to grasp that and understand that what we're putting out as strategy and tactical plans are really not so much subjective as they are really proven out in all the things we know about our customer, in all of the likely outcomes that we know about our different events. So this evolving business as usual is a case study from LensCrafters. We've been working with them for a couple of years, and one of the challenges that they faced was that when you looked at their situation, they had a lot of subjective measures. They were looking at primarily behavioral data. They didn't really have a sense for what some of the need states or motivational or drivers were. What happened there is that this whole issue of relevance became pretty difficult for them in that they didn't really have a process for scaling opportunities, understanding really what are the things that are highly relevant, and getting to a point where they're able to kind of prioritize and prove out to the organization that what was going on or being put forward as a strategy was really the best thing that they could be moving forward to. One of the things that we did with them was to create a comprehensive segmentation model, which we're going to walk through a little bit some of the tenets of, and give you a sense for how we not only just did the segmentation, which is really probably the more easy part of that equation, but then how did that change or influence how we looked at different marketing opportunities, both one-to-one as well as other multi-channel, and then how did that change our overall philosophy and how we manage the customer. So the segmentation piece here is showing you some of the primary components. And what you're going to find is that what really is a kind of a game-changing opportunity for many marketers is moving away from purely describing customers to building more of a persona. Not a new idea, but with all of the data available to us today, there are some higher bars that we could try to reach or stretch to that make this a little bit more interesting. What you'll see within the segmentation scheme is that we're looking at not only their behavioral information and the value that they provide to the organization, the things that they buy. That stuff in the upper right-hand quadrant of the second page is kind of expected. But on the first page, the persona piece is really designed to build out what it is that that customer is all about, what their needs are, where they are in their life stage, the types of media and other kinds of marketing channels that they're typically engaging in, and some other brands that they're typically buying as well, to give you a sense for what's typically in their mind, what their standards are as far as what they're looking for from different companies in terms of quality and service, as well as what their likelihoods of purchasing our products are. So this really broad view of the customer gives us a chance then to extend out into many different areas and to prove out to the organization that this information or that this segmentation and our approach to that is really appropriate. The how we do that part, some of the nuts and bolts here. One of the things that we typically try to work with would be some appended attitudinal data. Now, one of the debates that we typically have internally and with client is, do we start with behavioral data or attitudinal, or need state and attitudinal, and which should really be the driver? I don't think there's a single right answer to that question, but the approach that we take is to look at really what the assets that are available and to understand really some of the gaps within our clients' marketing mix and in their marketing success history. And looking at the attitudinal piece, that drives a lot of our overlay strategies as well. So when we look at attitudinal information through sources like MRI or other syndicated sources, we're able to understand really what are the key drivers of what's making that customer want to purchase from you. And when they look at the category, what's the motivational driver behind a lot of the decisions that they make. So that information obviously gives us a sense to understand those key groups, and then through our append strategies, we're able to soft key and sometimes hard key those things back in, whether it be things based on geography, life stage, age, or other things that can be appended from an overlay standpoint onto your marketing database, where this then attitudinal data can be overlaid on top, which gives you, again, a fairly rich view of their attitudinal state. The one-to-one behavioral data typically drives a lot of the need state, opportunity identification, and differentiation. So when we look at, from a need state standpoint, the typical products or the basket that they're likely to have, as well as the timing and the tendencies of their transactions. And then from a larger, bigger data standpoint, obviously the omni-channel interaction and engagement information, those are things that, especially with the help of a loyalty program, or if we're able to track things through a known session through the website or through an online POS, that gives us a chance to understand, again, what their channel dynamics may be outside of direct, and obviously gives us a sense to know about the reach or the breadth of what they're typically wanting to engage in. With that information in place, where we know really the need state, the attitude, some of the motivators for those customers, obviously that's where the strategy ideation becomes very rich, very exciting. One of the things, again, that many businesses struggle with is then what to do next, what's the biggest opportunity, how do I kind of get off the dime from a decision-making standpoint, and how do I get the organization to align behind this and understand and believe as well that this is really the right place to go. There's a lot of different paths to that answer. The place that we typically start, mainly because of it's very expedient, it's very straightforward, easy for people within the organization to understand, is to look at really the KPI drivers and what kind of cost-benefit relationships there are in changing or evolving them. So the first big part of that discussion is really understanding what are those KPIs for your business and getting alignment internally on that. That sounds, again, very simple, but so many times we see challenges produced by not really having an understanding and an agreement as to really what we're trying to measure and what really does success look like. With that in place, measuring how much it takes or what's the size of prize of actually moving things up by a unit is a fairly straightforward one, where you can look at both top line sales as well as profitability. And then that information is able to be forecasted out based on what we think our opportunity and market is. That piece sounds pretty accounting-centric, although it becomes much more marketing-centric when we start to apply that down to a segment level and start to understand what we think different groups of customers are likely to represent from an opportunity standpoint, and start to actually put hard numbers behind what we think we can move with a sense for what strategies or what KPIs would be the key indicators for that. As we go through the whole CRM component here, one of the things that also is becoming more critical for us as multi-channel marketers is to realize that our CRM programs really are not standing alone in the marketplace, that they're living in a multi-channel world. And very often, one of the challenges we have in looking even at success of different programs or campaigns is looking at really what attribution rules apply and how do we best identify what are some of the key outcomes based on what actually is in market at the same time. So this kind of segmentation information also allows us to differentiate how our multi-channel efforts are impacting the business. A simple little case would be here looking at penetration. If you think of the need for acquisition and the penetration rates at a segment level as being, as lending some insight into that, it gives you a sense for how we can start to understand where the gaps are where CRM can play a bigger role or where the attribution for incremental is actually more likely and where possibly other channel or multi-channel engagement is going to be of benefit as well. One of the things that clients oftentimes are surprised by is really how much opportunity growth-wise is present at a segment level. So in this case, in general, what you were able to see through this kind of exercise is what kinds of customers have been attracted from the channels that have been prominent, say in this case, acquisition. And it gives us a sense for what some of the low-hanging fruit opportunities are and possibly how difficult it may be to move the needle with other segments that have been pretty well hammered or penetrated through other channel engagement. One of the big benchmark positions or spots that we have in this whole process is bringing these things together. And obviously, I'm not wanting you to try to get a sense for the detail on there, but there's really three specific steps in this process that we found to be very empowering for our clients. And that is understanding, again, who the customer is from a persona standpoint and what motivates them. So it's more from a strategy standpoint. What do we think our big ideas are founded on? What's the basis for this type of engagement? And how do we think that this is going to work? And then looking at those in a more tactical way, on the second half of the sheet, we start to show how we would rank out things based on the different opportunities for those specific campaigns or product promotional opportunities. When we look at this at a segment level, it allows us to see not only what types of customers are likely to trigger off of certain campaigns, but also when you look vertically across or down this, we're able to see what ideas really have the biggest bang for the organization as a whole. So when we think of prioritization, we really want to think of it in both ways. How do we most impact certain key segments, or how do we impact each segment in the most relevant way? And then secondarily, from an organization standpoint, how big of an idea is this? How does it rank across all ideas within the organization or within the CRM entity, and how do we prioritize and focus our efforts that way? This gives us really a roadmap to understand how we would want to start moving ahead and planning for different kinds of development, and also how we want to set up and stage our multi-channel campaigns to take advantage of what we believe is to be the most likely outcome economically. Along the way, CRM, can get to be a little formulaic, and one of the things that we try to do to kind of break out of that mold is to take a more intuitive or a more inventive, step in looking at them. So we're looking at obviously need state information as a primary driver for a lot of the CRM activity, but we also want to look at the whole issue of timing and how do we make the most of our timing opportunities and look at things that can be actually triggered, which may not take a lot of human involvement along the way, but give us some rich opportunities to set a nice foundation of communication that would be beneficial. And then what makes it actually very appealing, and we'll call it here a seducible moment, is understanding not only what their needs are, what their likely wants are, but along with the timing component and understanding in a more deep level from a persona standpoint, we can start to think of communications or opportunities or experiences that go beyond the expected and break out of purely a promotional relationship in more of a communication that actually starts to share value with the client or with your customers and get them to a point where they start to be surprised and delighted throughout what the marketing campaign is doing. And as we look at this in its continuum then, many times what our clients are needing some assistance in is how do we, again, prove out to our other constituencies that these ideas are sound, that they're solid, that they really are our next best ideas, and we should all align behind these. This is just an example of a life cycle communications piece, and across the top, those are some of the key components of our analytical work, things related to how we segment and prioritize segments, how we look at the different timing or triggered events that are likely, and then how do we leverage our advocacy opportunities and ultimately close the sale at the right time with the right types of offers. So when we pull these all these pieces and components together, it gives our clients the opportunity to understand and align on really how important these different ideas are, how these campaigns should be interacting together, and how important it is to get the right development in place to make these things happen in the right way. And then down below, it also gives us a sense for what the different communication experiences they may be getting from us. So again, it's always tough to think as a consumer, but to put your consumer hat on and understand this is what's going to be coming to me through the different multi-channel events, and how would that really start to make our brand more relevant, become viewed as a higher quality player in their consideration set, and ultimately try to close more business. When we bring this to life, just to give you a sense for how this played out, LensCrafters themselves was very much focused on product. Product and fashion was really the only real statement that they were pushing out in the marketplace. And with the evolution of the segmentation, what we're able to do is to really change the tone of the conversation with their consumers. And this is just an example of some of the communication going out to their 40-plus seniors group who are more multifocal centric. And you can see that the whole messaging is much more around seeing better, it's eye health, it's quality of life. It's telling them that through this brand, you're able to find the latest, the greatest technologies that are going to extend your ability to live a fruitful life. From a fashion standpoint, you can see as we start to get into the more fashion-centric or fashion-motivated buyers, it's not at all about health or safety or quality of life so much as it is quantity of life and seeing better through looking better through fashion. So the whole look is turned quite a bit on the communications front here, and it looks much more as a fashion type of play as opposed to something around a quality of life indicator. And if you look at families, how families would evolve in this communication stream, it's also showing that that our brand is really the right solution for their entire family. So it's not just about a single consumer's decision. It's not just about fashion or about health, but it's this brand can actually solve all the needs of our family and probably give us a better value along the way, which again is a competitive difference that they'd have against their other competitive set. And finally, Mr. Classic, which is probably someone that is least price sensitive, most focused on quality, not overhyping, probably having a much lighter promotional or a discounting strategy, but looking at different ways to bring the message of quality, which is really what resonates with this type of person, into focus for them, that they can see that this brand stands for things beyond just flash and fashion, but also it provides the breadth of a solution that I may need from a quality standpoint to make a difference. And that's it. Any questions?
One. We'll give them a second to think about it. I'll take you a little bit off track here. Analytics is a huge field, right? There's all sorts of people going into it, accountants to statisticians and things like that. And I don't think anybody in here that has an analytics team doesn't feel like that it's not a lean team. The demands are heavy. You manage to run a pretty lean shop. And personality-wise, analytics folks can be quite different. It's somebody who's a deep SAS programmer is very different than somebody who likes to describe personas and put life to them. How do you manage to assemble a team, keep them focused, yet meet all of the demands inside a company? Because that's the challenge that many companies are facing today.
Yeah, I think the way that we've approached it is that you can really think of it in at least two different types of people: folks that are supporting operations and folks that really need to be infused in the strategy process. And I think that's really kind of the deciding line that we try to make within our organization as far as where people focus. From the operations side, that's in our world, that's usually 75–80% of the effort. There's a whole different level of focus within that type of engagement where you're needing quality, very high efficiency of effort or production, and a lot of detail involved. From a strategy standpoint, it's a very different exercise, and it really requires a business knowledge. And ultimately, I think we get our best successes when the analyst is actually involved in the overall strategy team, in the account team, and is able to play a much broader role than just being the statistician or the analytics guy. It's being able to actually provide a point of view from a business standpoint.
Very good, thanks. Any other questions from the audience?
Great.
I'll actually field a question. Might as well. So I've been working on this. I'm the project director for this event. I've worked on the program, both the program side, but also kind of the loyalty, business intelligence, CRM side. And I know your topic was identifying key data to help your business grow. So I know there's kind of talks with the whole big data angle of, can we make all data useful, or like to what percentage of this data is actually useful? You have certain people who are saying, yeah, you can make all of it useful. You have other ones saying 95, 98% of it, not so much. It's really the key data you're going for. Like kind of looking outside that key data aspect, how do you see that peripheral data really helping out for company strategies and company segmentation?
I think if part of your question is, how do you address the challenge of having too much information? Data reduction is always a big part of the process. So when we looked at some of the segmentation work and you look at all your multi-channel data, it's getting efficient at culling it down. Pareto principle or like an 80-20 rule is oftentimes present, if not even more so, especially when you start looking at, more social or multi-channel information. So it's having the tools in the process and the know-how to kind of bring that down into what's actually relevant to you through different types of searches and different types of filtering.
Okay, and in terms of, I know this was kind of about Exotica and really focusing on that particular vertical, like, does it, is that pretty much, regardless of vertical, it's more of that type of approach, or there's certain verticals are more sensitive than others?
Yeah, part of it is what you have to work with, where you can start out. They happen to have a fairly rich marketing database. They had access to different types of information that allowed us to get at, need state and things that are attitudinal in basis. It's tough to say there isn't really one formula for that so much as it is looking at where your resources are today and understanding what really are the objectives that you're moving towards. If you're struggling in certain areas, you may approach it a little bit differently. For them, it was making things more relevant because they kind of came at everyone with a one-size-fits-all approach. If that's where you're starting out, you probably have opportunities from a need state or product breadth or product combination standpoint, as well as some attitudinal information that would break out different pockets of people that you'd want to market to differently.
Okay. We have some time here, so if anyone has any questions, don't be shy. All right.
Great. Well, thank you.
No, Dan, we got a question over here.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Great.
Hello. How do you rationalize from an investment perspective the different creatives that could be required for a same campaign to really be personalized to a segment group?
Oh, not up. When we look at the size or the cost-benefit differences for different types of ideas or strategies, that is where that starts. In thinking that there's a threshold that idea has to be able to prove out certain levels of incremental to really be worthy of investment. So we scale the investment from a creative standpoint depending on what those numbers look like to some degree. Now, a lot of the examples that we showed you were, or some of those for sure were email, where you can be more templated in your approach. That is a way to kind of get around some of that cost or complexity. But ultimately, you have to kind of commit to what you think is likely to prove out to be a winning approach or winning combination. So I don't think there's a single answer to that piece other than you need to go out there and maybe even you start with piloting. If cost is an issue, start smaller as far as testing fewer things or less breadth with that and understand really what's moving the needle or what kind of incremental opportunities are actually being seen in market as opposed to just forecasted and then you roll out a big evolutionary program. Anything else? Great. Well, hey, thanks for your time again.
Thank you.